Real estate is the largest asset class in the world. It's how a lot of people become more wealthy, but it's like so painful. It's painful for the people, it's painful for the agents. I was like, this needs to change.
What if buying a home was almost as easy as shopping online? Today on Money Moves, we're sitting with Helen Chen, co-founder of Nomad Homes. With AI-powered agents and a fresh take on real estate, she's aiming to disrupt an age-old industry to make it smarter, faster, and more accessible. Whether you're eyeing your first home or your next investment, this episode has plenty to offer. So Helen, is it true that you started in real estate at the age of 10?
That is true. So for me, the ripe age of 10 is when I started in real estate. So let's rewind a little bit. First, just, I'm Chinese, as you can tell. And if there's one thing you know about Chinese people is they love to buy real estate. And so do my parents. So my job when I was 10, they put me to work because I was free labor. And it was actually turning the rental properties, getting it ready for the tenants, the painting, the fixing, the plumbing, the electricity. My secret talent is actually assembling IKEA furniture that I learned when I was 10. So if you ever need help, give me a call.
Thank you. No, that teaches a lot. I mean, especially at that age, to have that kind of outlook. Did you get a sense of how the business side of it works?
Yeah.
And what did your parents instill in you from that age?
So hard work first. This is not easy.
Yeah.
And this was my summers. But actually, what I learned from my parents about this is we were pretty middle class growing up. This actually taught me about the money side of real estate is actually that it can actually create generational wealth. And so we went from pretty middle class to definitely upper middle class because of the real estate that we owned. And so it's actually it's a mechanism for social mobility too.
Fascinating. And did your parents teach you any explicit lessons along the way that you take with you even to now?
Buy low, sell high.
Buy low, sell high.
It's buy low, sell high, which, everybody knows that. But it's also the advantages of using a mortgage and the benefits of that. Leverage, as I would later learn in life, is an incredibly important mechanism when done correctly, because it's also risky. But it's an important driver of how you can actually expand your portfolio and use $200,000 to buy $1 million worth of property because of leverage. So mortgages are really important.
No, it's great to get these lessons early on. Obviously, it's stuck with you, seeing that you're the founder of Nomad Homes.
Yes.
Now, that name is actually quite interesting, right? So it's like nomad, you don't have really a home, and homes. Can you tell us how you square that?
Yeah, so this is, we do a new joiner event every month, and this is the number one question that we get.
What's up with the name?
Why are you calling yourself Nomad Homes? Okay, so first, we are actually helping nomads find their homes. So we want people to stop being nomadic and find a home. So that's the first piece. The second piece is we started in Dubai, as you know, and we actually wanted to pay homage to the Bedouin roots of our company.
Yeah.
So Nomad actually does come from nomadic people, which obviously has a deep tradition within the GCC and Dubai specifically. The last piece is a little bit more vain, I would say. So one, as a tech company, you need a cool name. I'm not gonna name it Helen Chen Incorporated. That's not my style. And the second piece is we wanted an N or an H in our names. So if you look at our logo, there's a little house with a squiggle in our logo.
And you got both, right? You got the N and the H.
I mean, our logo is normally just an N.
Yeah.
But that's the vanity part of it.
Do you yourself feel like a bit of a nomad? I mean, you've lived in multiple places.
I live in a lot of places.
Yeah.
Because we started in Dubai and we expanded into Europe. So France, Spain. I move around a lot. I'm very fortunate to have a husband who supports that. But really it's because I like to be on the ground with the team, with our customers, with our users. And I'm fortunate enough that I can actually do that.
No, it's quite a responsibility and also a very emotional journey for people, especially finding their first home.
Absolutely.
I mean, is there a calling to that? I mean, does that weigh heavily on
It does. Real estate in general is the largest asset class in the world. It's also the largest store of wealth for individuals. It's how a lot of people become more wealthy. And so when we think about real estate in general and helping people, find their homes, it is a big responsibility. It's their life savings going into a home.
No, that emotional journey now, especially with the introduction of technology, there's a big question of so are you trying to remove some of the emotion out of it? Where do you see the role of tech in such an emotional journey?
Yeah, so at Nomad Homes, our job is to actually empower the real estate agents to deliver the experience that buyers and sellers want, to make that home buying journey simple, efficient, and smooth. And so the reason why our business is actually to empower the agents is actually because home buying is such a complex and emotional process. I don't think you can remove the person.
Yeah.
And where people say, oh, I'm displeased with my agent, it's actually because the agent hasn't evolved with the times of technology. And that's where we step in. Our job is to give the agents the latest technology, including AI, so that they can deliver the experience that the buyers and the sellers actually expect from them. And so, some companies are trying to remove the agent, and we actually take the complete opposite belief, because this is too big of a transaction not to talk to someone, not to talk to an expert about going through the entire process.
And the tech itself, how does it work, and how does it empower the agent?
Yeah, so our flagship product is it's an AI co-pilot for real estate agents. AI co-pilot is like a fancy name for a personal assistant. So Remy is the personal assistant's name, and it's always with the agent. So think about what a PA normally does. Remy does that for the agent. So Remy takes a lot of the admin burden off of the agent, and really keeps the agent on track. 50% of leads never get a call back.
Yeah, I've been one of those 50%.
And that's
for
crazy,
sure. Yeah.
And that's it's not like the agent doesn't want to call you back.
Yeah.
Of course they do. It's a commission-only business. They want to make money. They want to help the clients, and you're a client, So that's not the core reason. Is agents are not bad people, but they don't have the tools to actually keep them on track.
Now, there's been a flood of these AI meeting, note-taking, softwares.
Yeah.
How is Remy different from what's already out there?
Yeah. So Remy is industry specific
Okay.
for real estate agents. Our end goal is to make a personalized Remy for each agent. And so that's learns your tone of voice, learns your process, learns how you like to reach out to your clients, learns your client base. When's the last time you reached out to them? How do you reach out to them? At what frequency? With what tone? Is it over email, SMS? How do you do it? And this relies on a vast amount of data, vast amount of data for us to train our models to be able to do that. And that's why, for us, being industry specific is so incredibly important.
And verticalizing is quite interesting, right? I think
Absolutely.
We've seen that in software, SaaS solutions that are specific for an industry, and it allows you to go quite deep and provide a solution that works really well for that context. Interested to hear about your verticalization strategy for real estate.
Yeah, so I firmly believe in vertical software, especially because of the advancements in AI. So if you think about what's available today, the LLMs that are available today, OpenAIs, Anthropics of the world, Llamas of the world, they're really good already.
Yep.
So how you make those LLMs specific to your industry, specific to your problem, you actually need to feed those LLMs or your own LLMs very specific data.
Interesting. But aren't they eating up the world, though? I mean, are we heading in a direction where verticalization is going away?
My personal belief is that the way that these companies are built, they're actually built as models that everybody else sits on top of. And so in order for you to differentiate, if I built AI for real estate agents, for CEOs, for you, for me, that AI would not be better than what you could do with ChatGPT.
Right.
So for us, vertical is super important, and that actually starts with the data that we feed it.
So give us an example of how being verticalized and specific really makes a difference in terms of what you are providing.
Yeah, so if you think about buyers, sellers, agents, there's a couple of key pieces of information that are so important that just come up over and over again in the conversations. So it's one, what's your budget? When are you looking to move? When are you available for viewings? Do you have financing in place? And those are the pieces where, from our data, we really do know that it's like you need to nail these pieces all the time.
And it's, you're founder, CEO of a tech company, but also have a very successful career in investing.
Oh,
from
you're too kind.
Biggest names, I mean, Goldman Sachs and Blackstone, even Sovereign Wealth Fund. I'd love to kind of get some of your insights on investing, actually.
Okay.
And put yourself in the shoes of an early career college graduate that has like $10,000 to invest.
Yeah.
And wants to build up an initial portfolio.
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you give?
Okay, so let me put my investing hat back on.
Yeah.
So you're totally right. I used to work in investing, in private equity, also at a family office. So technically, I should be good at this. Technically.
Let's hear what you got.
Okay, so there's a couple things when I think about building a portfolio. When you're young, you can take more risk because you have a long time before you need to retire, and generally you're younger, right? You have more earnings potential. And as you get older, 50, 60, you want to take less risk in your portfolio. The second piece that I think about in building a portfolio is what kind of access do you have to these investments? And the last piece I think about is actually fees.
Okay, interesting.
Fees are important. How much per year are you paying for either an ETF, which is a fund that's publicly traded, or a mutual fund, or a manager to actually manage your money? So if you're only making 10% a year and you pay 2% of fees per year, that's 8% a year.
Right.
That's a big difference. So my general advice is, you're not a professional investor. You should just set it and forget it.
Okay.
Generally speaking, most people have a lot of success investing in the S&P 500, which is the 500 biggest companies listed in the US. These are huge names that everybody knows, Teslas, Googles of the world, Facebooks of the world, Apples, Nvidia. And over the past 20 years, the S&P 500 has on average returned 10% a year. That's a lot. In 10 years, you're going to triple your money. In 20 years, you're going to basically do so many more X's on your money. And so that's kind of my general advice first is put it in, set it and forget it. There's basically no fees on this S&P 500 ETF because it's so popular. And that means it doesn't eat into your returns. So then my second piece of this is actually, I do believe in the power of purchasing your home.
Okay.
So I think personally, you should put it in the S&P 500, let it grow, let it grow, let it grow until you have a down payment for your home, and then split it. So put 50% into the S&P 500, and then put 50% into the down payment of your home, because now your money has grown.
So just back to the S&P, I completely hear you that it's been historically the best bet, and over the long run has shown to return great, amount. What's your take on, though, for this next 10, 20, 30 years? You think that the U.S.'s economy is the place to throw all of our money, or would you diversify to any extent, especially for people who imagine they're just starting now?
So one common misconception is actually, though the S&P 500 is for companies listed in the U.S., these companies actually do business everywhere. So think about, do you have an iPhone?
Yes, I do.
There we go. Okay, so Apple makes a lot of money outside of the US. It just happens that the company is listed in the US.
Makes sense.
So that's the first thing. The second thing that I am actually kind of excited about is actually cryptocurrency ETFs.
Okay.
And crypto is a huge asset class that is coming up. It basically democratizes the flow of money.
So break it down for us. What's a cryptocurrency ETF?
So it's a basket of either cryptocurrencies or companies that are based on cryptocurrencies. So Bitcoin to Coinbase, they're all kind of mixed in there. And the reason why I'm pretty excited about this is historically, world economies have been pretty US dollar based, and that's probably going to change. over the next, 50 years.
Seems that way.
And a lot of people are actually turning to cryptocurrencies because it is widely available, especially in emerging markets where sometimes the government is less stable and has less stable of a currency. People actually just move away from that and go towards the cryptocurrencies. So in that regard, generally speaking, S&P 500 is still tried and true. So maybe I do, 80% in the S&P 500.
Okay, so 8,000 of the
8,000 into S&P 500, 20% into this crypto ETF that's now become available. And then whenever you save enough money, I would reallocate and then buy your home.
Because there's also people who will tell you that's like the worst thing you can do, right? You should just always rent, don't buy.
There are people like that. And this is probably, while I am like pretty forward thinking in a lot of things, this is like tried and true, makes sense. And I'll tell you why it makes sense.
Tell me.
Okay, when you think about buying your home, most people don't buy it in cash. They take out a mortgage.
That's right.
A mortgage is a really special instrument because you can borrow a lot of money. So say you put $1 million into your home, you put a mortgage down for $200,000 and you borrow the $800,000. The $800,000 you are borrowing at like basically what it costs governments to borrow money at. And that means it's super special because the cost of borrowing is so low that it makes it so that the investment is worthwhile. The second piece of this, and this is a non-financial reason, is actually because it's like a forced savings mechanism.
Okay.
It forces you to save. And that's why so many people, have their largest store of wealth is actually in their home, is because the mortgage is such a special instrument that actually encourages home ownership. Like you're borrowing at the cost of a sovereign, like the same cost as a country. You definitely have more risk than the country, but it's a special financial instrument. And the second piece is it forces you to save every single month. So instead of paying rent to a landlord, you're actually paying rent to yourself and then putting that money into your home.
Interesting. Now, you were in the top investment funds. You decided to leave your job in investing. You were at a family office. You had been at a sovereign wealth fund. You've been at some of the top names in the industry to go pursue an MBA at Stanford.
Yep.
And then you dropped out, right?
Yes.
So tell us about that journey. I mean, what made you make that decision and what brought you out to Dubai?
So if there's one thing, I'm Chinese American. If there's one thing you need to know about Chinese people, is that they love Stanford. They would pay their livers for their kids to go to Stanford.
I remember seeing all the tours, coming in. And
I mean, education's really important in Chinese culture, and I had some weird looks from my grandparents when I was like, "Hey, I'm dropping out of Stanford."
Well, first of all, I'm sure the joy when you got in, right?
They were
it must have been.
God,
did you have
my daughter's going to
acceptance
Stanford.
parties? Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, cool. I'm excited too. It's a great school. I love it. The reason why I went to business school is because I wanted to pursue my passion, which has always been in real estate. So you remember, we started by talking on, when I was 10, I started my real estate career. That flowed, right? And I really love it. So I went to Stanford. I was not a great student. My parents were also worried that I was gonna not pass, which is really hard, but they were worried. And I basically was talking to everybody who would talk to me about how do people buy and sell homes? What do the companies do? What's available in the market? And I was gallivanting the world, because you can in business school, doing this internationally too. And I was like, wow, this is so important. It's the largest store of wealth. That's why I'm so bullish about it, right? But it's so painful. Why is it this painful? It's painful for the people, it's painful for the agents. It shouldn't be like this.
Yeah.
We live in a world where technology is pretty advanced, And so I was like, this needs to change. And so I was spending a lot of time across Dubai and other markets, and I was like, man, we gotta do something. And then I dropped out. I was like, this is so important to me that I was like, okay, if no one's gonna fix this, I'm gonna fix it.
You're such a trailblazer, and that must have been a difficult decision. I mean, let's go back to your family's expectations and the social implications. What was it like? How did you feel at that stage?
Personally, I was like, this is the right call.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking to myself, I was like, if I don't do this and someone else does my ideas and goes and fixes this, like I'm never gonna forgive myself. I was like, okay, like for that reason alone, like I need to do this. My parents were like pretty chill about it.
Okay.
I was like surprised.
Wow.
Yeah, they were like, well, you already have like 1 degree. Like,
you're gonna be okay. You're not gonna be on the streets.
You're okay, My grandparents were like, Helen, like, what are you doing? Like, can't you wait a year?
You reached the end goal, right?
I know. Yeah. They were like, this is the pinnacle of education. Like, what are you doing?
That's hard. I mean, I have a lot of respect because I know inertia is something difficult to break. I mean, if you're in a certain path. I remember, leaving a job after 11 months was like, wait a second.
What are you doing?
But at least finish, at least 2 years usually, right? Or at least a year. But sometimes opportunities, that was the first company I co-founded, actually. It was like, that was the opportunity at that stage. And you never know if it's going to come around again, right?
You never know. I'll tell you a funny story, though.
Yeah.
So I also got married at the same time that I dropped out.
Okay, so everything's happening.
Everything happened. I was like, I'm very excited about, my marriage and my husband. And then 4 days after our wedding, I was like, move around the world. Let's do this. So in Chinese culture, you probably know this. They want you to get married too.
Yeah.
It's part of the social expectations. So that kind of like tempered the blow.
Oh, great. So yeah, because you're just like,
yeah.
tit for tat, kind of,
a little
lost
bit,
out on this, but I got married.
But I got married, and they were like, okay, cool, yeah. So then they were like, Helen, where are the grandkids coming? I was like, okay, hold on a second. Like, I just gave you a win over there. But
no, but that's a big decision, and then obviously moving around the world, and now being in Dubai, and I know you came out at a time when obviously things were exciting and such, but then like soon thereafter there was the global pandemic, and you were like suddenly in lockdown trying to build an offline company in a lot of senses.
Yeah, so this was pretty crazy. We had just raised money coming into the pandemic.
Yeah.
And we had signed the docs, and it was like February of 2020, and I was like, please just wire the money. Like, please just wire the money. Just wire the money. Like, because I had heard these crazy rumors that like people were like pulling term sheets and pulling money back, and I was like, whoa, like.
So you were in the midst.
I was in the midst.
Signed docs, but no money in bank account.
Signed docs, but no money.
Wow.
And I was like, oh. And I'm very grateful for our investors because they were like, no, like we're wiring. Like, don't even think about that. But as a founder, so I was like.
That must have been nerve-wracking.
Until like the money actually hits the bank account, you're kind of just like, ooh. So yeah, we actually launched straight into COVID.
So before we talk about that,
Yeah.
I mean, the investors that you lined up, and the operators and the angels, tell us a little bit. I mean, just tell us a couple of the folks, and how were you able to convince them? I mean, that's not easy.
Yeah, so we're very fortunate to have like a great group of investors who support what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple are like A-Crew, who's a multi-stage Valley fund, 01, so they were the former Twitter executives, so like before Elon, before Jack.
Before.
Yeah, other people like, Proptech and Class 5 and Precursor, Abstract. So those are really great names to have on your cap table because they're great VC investors. They have a lot of respect. They also like support you as a company. And we were also fortunate to get, the founders of Zillow, founders of Open Door as investors who bring like a lot of domain expertise into what we do. So
you're saying that casually, but that's not an easy feat. I mean, it's and so a lot of times the value of those types of investors really comes out when things are quite tough.
Yeah.
Can you take us back to a time when it was like really hard? Who did you pick up the phone and call? Like, what was that conversation like?
We actually had a more, direct consumer bent, helping the buyers and sellers directly. But then we were like, nope, we're going all in to help the agent. Like, we built all these tools, we're going to help the agents now. And that was like a very pivotal moment for the company because we basically said, like, we're going B2B. And I talked to all of our investors.
That's not what they signed up for, by the way, right?
That's not what they signed up for. But when I talked to them, they were honestly like very supportive. And they just said, like, Helen, like, a lot of what we sign up for is actually supporting the company, but it's also supporting you as a decision maker. Like, everything you're telling us makes sense. And if you think this is the right way to go, we support it, which I'm very grateful to have like a team and partners like that. But those are kinds of like some of the conversations that we have with them. And it makes a difference, like when you have investors who really believe in the founders. I think people call it like founder friendly or founder supportive investors.
And so, was there a point at which you felt that the company was at risk during this journey? Tell me, I want like a war story of like when things were really hard.
Well, let me tell you like what we've been through now.
Yeah.
Okay, so one global pandemic, Russia and Ukraine. Now in MENA, we also went through global like boom and bust in technology.
Yes.
I'll tell you the hardest one actually. So the hardest one is actually when we went through this like tech boom and bust at the same time, because a company is like a living, breathing thing. So when you go from like the highs of 2021, when everyone's like, just spend the money, spend the money, spend the money.
Just grow
at all costs, to like in 12 months, it's like, no, you need to get profitable ASAP.
Austerity.
Yeah, that is actually really tough for a company to like go from this direction to like this direction.
And not just for, I mean, it's difficult for you as a leader, but how did you manage that with the team as well?
It's really tough. Like, you know, you have all of these perks. We had so much swag and t-shirts and mugs.
Massages and
none of that.
Pool tables.
No, we never got there. We never got there. Don't go crazy. But
no, it makes sense. No, it's really setting a different culture.
It is. It's like we're getting profitable. And that is like a huge shift in the way that people think. From like, I have unlimited money to like go do this, to like, nope, like I gotta make the money to spend the money. And that, as a leader, as a leadership team, I'm very grateful to my leadership team who like understood it all. But it takes some time for like this ship to go from like this way to like this way.
Yeah, and that's quintessentially, I mean, the role of the CEO and the founder is to kind of guide that, and it's difficult time, especially when you have to make those pivots, and you've had to make several along your journey.
I mean, that's what happens when you're in a company. But I think this one, like internally, when we like change strategy or we move directions, it's actually not that hard. Like it's hard, but we do it, you know? But when the macro and the external changes so much, that's really hard. That's really hard because it's out of your control. Like people are like, I feel like I just got whiplash. And you have to help people understand, and that's part of being a leader.
And then you were able to go on and after that initial round raise another 40 or so.
Yeah, we've raised like $40 million in total. We're very grateful. We're in a very fortunate position that we have investors who support us like this.
So, you know, reflecting now on the way the global real estate market looks, it's getting harder and harder for people to buy anything, right? Particularly in some geographies.
Absolutely.
Has that informed sort of your view into like which markets or, you know, what role you can play as you start expanding?
So when we think about like which markets do we go into, so we're in Dubai and we expanded outwards.
Which is very rare and unique. It's very interesting.
It is unique. So we expanded into Europe and we're just coming into the US now. But when we look at markets to go into, one of the pieces that we cannot fix is actually the mortgage market or the financing market. So when we look at markets, like we actually need an environment where access to financing is available for people. Because when you don't have that as like a foundational piece of the economy, it makes it so that it's incredibly difficult for people to like buy a home. And so that is one of the things that we look for when we enter a new market.
And so your first expansion market out of Dubai was France.
Yes. So they may look different on the outside, but it's actually pretty similar.
Interesting.
It's people, it's agents.
But what about the business model itself? Is there a difference in the model of how you make money?
Also not a difference in how we make money. You know, when it comes to real estate, because globally it is such a like agent-led market, we actually tackle things in the same way. And so when we come back to like this financing market, you know, Dubai has a very robust financing market for mortgages, for people to buy their homes. So does France, so does Spain. Like in that regard, like that is something that we definitely look for, because without that, it becomes really difficult. You know, we talk about down payments being 20%, maybe 30%, to like, okay, you have to buy this thing in cash.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
And I think it's interesting, again, to highlight this movement from, you know, Dubai or from a more emerging tech market into Europe, and now you just said, you know, into the United States, that reverse flow than what we typically see.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Are there elements of learnings or things that you've brought from a market like Dubai into those that would be traditionally viewed as the more mature or developed markets?
Yeah, so one of the things that's happening now is actually because technology is like more readily available for people. Building in Dubai, building in France, or building in US, it's like pretty same. Like it's not so different anymore. Like I have access to the LLMs that someone sitting in San Francisco has access to. And I think this is actually where COVID made a big difference, is actually like this concept of like a mobile workforce, a global workforce who can work, you know, in office remotely. That has made a big difference in terms of how you build technology. So we've definitely been a big beneficiary of that. And I think you're totally right. It's like most companies will like import stuff into Dubai, whereas we're actually like, you know, Dubai, MENA to the world.
Yeah, you're exporting.
We're exporting.
I mean, because, you know, you could also say that you were in the heart of, you know, Silicon Valley with all the talent in the world, access to the, you know, tier one investors.
Yeah.
Everything was right there, and you left all of that and you decided to build the company in an emerging tech ecosystem.
Yeah, emerging tech ecosystem. I mean, one of the benefits of when you go outside of the valley is there is less competition. Like there's less money, there's less competition. And so that's one of the benefits, and it doesn't mean that the market opportunity is like any smaller.
Yeah.
In fact, our opportunity is really huge. Like if you look at, you know, I'm pretty close with the team at Kareem there, and it's like you see that. And
Massive
like,
story.
Massive story, you know? And it's like, okay, well, you can build these multi-billion-dollar companies in emerging markets. Maybe like, you know, because I have a Chinese background, like that might have played a little bit into it too. It's like, yeah, like I know there's a lot of things around the world
that aren't the US, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so now I guess going forward, what's your vision for where Nomad Homes is going, whether technology-wise, geographic expansion?
Yeah.
Where are things going in this next decade?
We're all in on AI. All in. If you talk to me like 18 months ago, I'd probably be like, maybe all in, you know? And that's like coming from a tech founder, right? But now it's like, nope, all in. Honestly, the advancements that we've seen in the models that are available to people, but also like what we've just been able to do in a very short amount of time. Like we could not have built Remy in a like generally cost-efficient manner, in a speed-efficient manner 24 months ago.
Wow.
Not possible. And today, like we're super excited about it. The agents are super excited about it. And we really see this opportunity to basically like transform the way that people work so that people can build the people-to-people relationship, and technology really takes that admin load off of people. And taking the admin load off people, it was just like not possible 2 years ago. It wasn't possible. It was like a bunch of CRMs that people didn't like to use, automations that like kind of worked, didn't work. But with what's happening in AI now, like honestly, it's incredible. It does the job of what people can do now. And that literally was not possible 2 years ago. So when you talk to me now versus then, it's like a totally different tone. And this isn't like, you know, AI is the buzzword of the minute, which it is.
Yeah.
But when you look at like what our team has done, the potential, and you know the speed at which the tech is evolving, it's like, yeah, this is the way.
I'd like to end with a quickfire round, if you
Oh my goodness.
If you don't mind. A few questions for you.
I had a lot of coffee, so
Yes.
I'm ready.
Okay, great. Any favorite book or article or podcast that for a founder that you refer to?
Yeah, 0 to 1 is a good book for me.
Now, what's the biggest mistake first-time house buyers make?
Not buying.
Delaying it, right?
Delaying it.
And what's the first question to ask before buying a home?
How much am I pre-approved for on my mortgage?
Biggest pain point in the buying process today?
Negotiations on the price.
Interesting.
Yeah.
AI going to solve that for us?
That's really tough. There's a lot of emotions in that one.
And when's the right time to transition from a renter to a buyer?
As soon as you can.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Helen, for being on Money Moves.
Absolutely. Thank you.